This truck was designed to survive a world war. Then, American farmers spent 40 years proving the war was the easy part. When the Dodge Power Wagon came home, it did not come home politely. It did not arrive with chrome dreams, soft seats, highway manners, or any real attempt to hide where it had been. It looked like a military vehicle with a civilian title. Flat fenders, tall stance, heavy bumper, narrow cab. A face that seemed less designed than issued. And that was exactly why it worked. In early 1946, Dodge introduced the WDX Power Wagon to civilians as a truck that, in its own advertising language, needed no roads. That line was not just marketing poetry. The truck came out of Dodge's wartime four-wheel drive experience, especially the 3/4-ton military trucks that had carried men, radios, ammunition, tools, and misery across terrain, where ordinary vehicles became dead weight. The strange part is what happened next. After the war, most machines were supposed to become more civilized. Cars got smoother. Trucks started inching toward comfort. America wanted peace, suburbs, appliances, and new paint. The Power Wagon went the other way. It brought the war home and asked for a job. A farmer looking at one in 1946 did not see style. He saw clearance, hooks, tires, a winch, a box big enough for fence posts, and a drivetrain that did not care whether the path was gravel, mud, snow, or no path at all. A rancher saw something that could pull itself out before the horses had to be called. A lineman saw a truck that could reach a pole line after rain had turned the road into soup. That is the first thing to understand. The Power Wagon did not become a legend because it was charming. It became a legend because charm was irrelevant. It had survived war by being useful. Rural America kept it alive for the same reason. On a Dodge dealer lot in the spring of 1946, the Power Wagon must have looked almost rude beside the normal civilian trucks. A farmer opening the door would find a cab that still felt closer to field equipment than transportation. Upright seating, levers where comfort should have been, and the kind of visibility you want when the front wheels are about to drop into a washout. Dodge could have softened it. The company could have hidden the military bones under a nicer body, changed the proportions, smoothed the face, made it feel less like surplus thinking. Instead, Dodge barely changed what mattered. That decision sounds lazy until you understand the market. There was no established civilian four-wheel drive pickup culture yet. The buyer Dodge was chasing was not asking for an adventure truck. He was asking for a machine that could do the work of a truck, sometimes the work of a tractor, sometimes the work of a stationary engine, and sometimes the work of a rescue vehicle. If that buyer cared about looking modern, he was looking at the wrong machine. The Power Wagon's cab itself came from older Dodge truck architecture, and the styling carried the military influence openly. Hood, grille, fenders, bumper, stance. It did not whisper utility. It shouted it. When Dodge introduced it to the open market, the company said no other manufacturer offered anything comparable. For once, advertising was not exaggerating much. It was expensive too. The 1946 Power Wagon started at $1,627, which was hundreds of dollars more than a conventional Dodge two-wheel drive one-ton pickup. In post-war money, that mattered. This was not a cheap farm toy bought on impulse. A man had to believe it would earn its keep. That price is one reason the Power Wagon's success is so revealing. People did not keep buying it because it was the easiest truck to justify on paper. They bought it because the paper never showed the whole job. A normal truck could carry feed down a road. The Power Wagon could carry feed after the road disappeared. A normal truck could tow on dry ground. The Power Wagon could drag equipment across a field and then run a winch from its own drivetrain. A normal pickup was transportation with a bed attached. The Power Wagon was closer to a mobile tool platform with license plates. The uncomfortable cab, the low speed, the stiff ride, the heavy controls, those were not flaws to the buyers who understood it. They were the cost of getting a war machine without waiting for the army to issue one. That is where the legend moved from brochure to dirt. By the late 1940s, Dodge was not just selling a truck. It was selling a way to mechanize jobs that had always required more than one machine. In 1949, Monroe Auto Equipment began offering a hydraulic lift kit and farm implements for the Power Wagon: plow, cultivator, rotary hoe, harrow, grader, scoop, earth mover, post hole digger, even a buzz saw. Dodge advertised that it could pull a 3-bottom 14-inch plow and encouraged farmers to think of it as something more than a truck. That sounds absurd from a modern pickup mindset. A pickup today might tow a trailer carrying equipment. The Power Wagon could become part of the equipment. A ranch could use it to haul supplies in the morning, pull a stuck vehicle before lunch, power a saw in the afternoon, and carry fencing tools back at dusk. A small town could mount firefighting equipment on it. A well drilling outfit could build around it. A road crew could fit a blade. A utility company could turn it into a pole-setting rig. Dodge understood this so well that its 1946 sales manual listed 75 types of businesses that might use one, from airports to well drillers. That is not a truck buyer profile. That is a map of every place in America where roads were optional and work still had to happen. One of the cleanest examples came from a New York State telephone company crew. The setup used a Power Wagon with a boom and winch powered by the truck's engine, plus an auger driven by a small auxiliary engine. With that equipment, 2 men could drill a post hole 12 inches across and 5.5 feet deep in just a few minutes. Stop there for a second. A telephone pole is not romantic. A hole in the ground is not cinematic. But that is exactly why the Power Wagon matters. It made boring, difficult, necessary work faster in places where ordinary trucks could only bring men near the problem. The Power Wagon brought the machine to the problem and then became the machine. That is how rural infrastructure gets built. Not with one heroic moment, but with thousands of small jobs done in mud, timber, pasture, snow, and gravel, far from a paved surface and farther still from applause. And because it looked almost unchanged year after year, people started reading that sameness as proof. A truck that does not change must already be right, or stubborn, or both. The Power Wagon was both. The easy mistake is to call the Power Wagon powerful because of the name. The numbers tell a different story. The original truck used a 230 cubic inch flathead 6, making about 94 horsepower. 94. A modern compact car laughs at that. But horsepower was not the point. The Power Wagon's real intelligence was in everything behind and around that engine. A 4-speed manual transmission, a 2-speed transfer case, low axle ratios like 4.89 or 5.83, heavy tires, dual power takeoff, and a chassis built to survive low-speed abuse. It had the kind of gearing that made highway travel feel like punishment, but made crawling through a field feel natural. Top speed was around 50 miles per hour. That alone tells you what Dodge prioritized. This truck was not trying to win the interstate future. It was built for the mile that takes 20 minutes, because it crosses a creek, climbs a cut bank, and ends at a fence line. The figures made sense in that world. The 1-ton Power Wagon could carry roughly 3,000 pounds of payload and had a maximum gross vehicle weight rating of 8,700 pounds in early form. With big 9.0/16 farm tires and deep gearing, it could pull, crawl, and drag long after a lighter pickup had polished its rear tires into the mud. This is the main correction to the myth. The Power Wagon did not succeed because it was unstoppable in some vague, macho way. It succeeded because every compromise was aimed at one buyer, the person whose work happened off the road. The steering was heavy because the front axle was serious. The ride was harsh because the springs were built for weight. The speed was low because torque multiplication mattered more than cruising. The cab was plain because nobody wanted upholstery to be the most delicate part of a truck used near barbed wire, gravel, and cattle. There is a fairness test here. By passenger car standards, the Power Wagon was terrible. Slow, loud, crude, thirsty, and old-fashioned almost immediately. By the standards of a rural workday, those complaints lost their force. A comfortable truck stuck at the edge of a field was comfortable in the least useful place possible. The Power Wagon's genius was that it accepted being bad at the wrong things. That is why nothing else felt quite the same. It was not merely four-wheel drive. It was four-wheel drive tied to winching, hauling, powering, crawling, and surviving. The drivetrain did not exist for weekend play. It existed to keep a job moving when the ground, weather, and distance all voted no. The modern Power Wagon trades on exactly that memory, even when the truck itself has become a very different animal. By 1968, the original flat-fender Power Wagon was ancient in the American market. Its appearance had stayed nearly unchanged for more than 2 decades, and the truck world around it had caught up. Other manufacturers were offering 4-wheel drive pickups. Buyers were starting to expect more comfort, more speed, more style, and less punishment from the driver's seat. Domestic sales of the original WDX WM300 line ended in 1968, after a reported 95,145 sold in the United States. Export production continued for years after that, which says something important. The places that still needed the old formula were often the places where roads were still suggestions. The name did not die cleanly. Dodge kept using Power Wagon badging on newer 4-wheel drive trucks, and later the old Soldier returned as an off-road package on the Ram 2500 in 2005. The modern version has electronics, comfort, safety systems, big power, and showroom polish the original never pretended to offer. But notice what Ram still reaches for when it uses the name: winch, stance, off-road credibility, rescue your own skin energy. The badge is not selling luxury first, it is selling inherited trust. That trust was earned before marketing departments learned how to package ruggedness as lifestyle. The original Power Wagon looked the way it did because the job demanded it. The modern one often looks back because buyers want a connection to a time when toughness was not a trim level. That difference matters. One was built from necessity and became mythology. The other borrows the mythology and tries to honor it with hardware. That is not an insult. It is the burden of a famous name. When a truck inherits the Power Wagon badge, it inherits farmers stuck in spring mud, linemen after storms, ranchers miles from help, fire crews on bad roads, and mechanics who learned that simple iron could be forgiven, repaired, and sent back out. It inherits a reputation built one miserable job at a time. That kind of reputation is hard to fake because it was never created for spectators. The reason originals still work today is not magic. It is mechanical logic. A flathead 6 is not exotic. A manual gearbox does not need software permission. A transfer case, a solid axle, a PTO shaft, a winch, a heavy frame. These are things a patient owner can understand with tools, time, and a floor jack. Parts can be repaired, remade, adapted, or found through the kind of community that forms around machines people refuse to throw away. Some surviving Power Wagons are restored better than new, polished into museum pieces. Others still wear dents, faded paint, farm welds, mismatched hardware, and the honest awkwardness of a machine that spent its life being used instead of admired. In a strange way, the rough ones tell the story better, because the Power Wagon was never supposed to be precious. It was supposed to start on a cold morning, crawl into a place where a normal truck had no business going, pull something heavier than itself, run a tool, carry a load, and come back with scratches that nobody bothered to count. That was the contract. For decades, farmers and ranchers and linemen accepted the discomfort because the machine kept its side of the deal. The war gave the Power Wagon its bones. Rural America gave it its soul, and that is why the opening line works. The truck was designed to survive a world war, but the war was only the first test. The harder test was 40 years of fields, storms, back roads, overloaded beds, frozen mornings, broken fences, washed out crossings, and owners who did not care what a machine had done yesterday if it failed today. The Power Wagon did not fail often enough to be forgotten. It became the truck people wore out and bought again. The machine that made 4-wheel drive feel like work before it became recreation. The ancestor of every serious 4x4 pickup that wants to be taken seriously when the pavement ends. The Power Wagon earned respect the day it was born. The next truck had to wait 50 years for it, and the people who mocked it are paying the price now.